Thank you all for being here. We are calling to order the special meeting of the board, specifically on the one item before us, which is the budget for 2025-2026 for the Board of Education for the city of Stamford. That being the case, I am going to turn our conversation and our discussion tonight over to our fiscal chair, Mr. Andy George.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hyman. I hope we don't do anything subversive here. The first resolution we have is Resolution 16. Be it resolved that on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools that the Board of Education approves the 2025-26 operating budget in the amount of $347,108,125 and 2,092.7 positions. Also moved. Do we have a second? It's a board meeting. Anybody can be here. So thank you, Mr. Hyman. So it's been moved and seconded. We do have, as I think everybody knows, several amendments that were proposed in writing, which we will go through. And again, maybe to explain a little bit, they might have been a bit confusing. We put them in an order such that certain amendments might negate other amendments that come later. So we've tried to put them in an order where if you approve the earlier amendments, there in some ways we do not need to consider later amendments, if that makes any sense. And I'll reiterate that as we go along if need be. So the first amendment that was submitted, the motion is the Board of Education amends the 2025-26 operating budget resolution as presented by the superintendent by eliminating 10 proposed special education assistant principal positions by reducing the salary and benefit accounts for administrators certified by $1,910 and $935 and 10 FTEs. Is there a motion? A motion moved by Ms. Hammond. Is there a second? By anybody on the board? All right.
Well, I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Mr. Larabina has seconded, and so we have the motion. So we are here for discussion. Anybody wishing to discuss? Yes, Ms. Hammond.
Yes, and let me explain. And President Hyman was very kind too, just to let me take 2-3 minutes to do this. This is not going to be lengthy, but the reason I put this forward, it's $2 million basically. And I believe that these 10 administrators will probably be doing more paperwork. We've not seen the job description yet, and they'll be less connected to students. So the reason I put it forward was just to put some questions out there, recommendations, and keep it simple. And if Jennifer, if you could put it up, and we'll just. So, that was the main goal. I really believe that we need to, get more the IEP compliance teachers and the PPS team, which stands for pupil, personnel, and service team, more involved rather than the administrators. If you could scroll up, Jen. And I'm just going to lead with the first two questions. The reason being between this $2 million expense, what and where are the problems and what data is driving the decision making? So those were my biggest concerns. And the reason I said, I think I'd like to have to look at it from another angle. And so I list some of those there that go deeper into my concern. And then I think, the piece that I'm recommending is to keep the 16 IEP compliance teachers and to train the PPS teams to be more consistent across the schools and follow legal expectations. And then I think the piece that really is most important is to go into focus groups to really look at what's happening. Perhaps we need an audit because $2 million is a lot of money. These individuals will not be directly connected to students. And I believe the more you add to the top, the less we're helping the students. So we'll just go to the second slide there, and it keeps it pretty simple. And so I just want to show the public to look at the actual numbers. So we right now at the district level, and I may be off one or two, but we have 17 special ed district administrators at central office and one TOSA, if I'm correct, one special ed lawyer. And then in the buildings, we have school contacts, which are very helpful for parents calling in and then saying, hey, I need help with this. And then we have 16 full-time teachers doing IEP compliance. And now what is requested is to add 10 more special ed assistant principals. This would mean we'd have 27 if those assistant principals were added. And right now that would mean we'd have 64 to 74 total leaders in special ed, including the PPS teams, which are, it's a team of 6, might be more because you have all the specialists, the OT, the PT, the speech and language, but you always have an administrator, you have the social worker, psychologist, 2 teachers, or that's what I'm used to in other districts, and then the caseworker or the responsible teacher for the student's IEP, which means you're adding another 138 plus to this, which I think we have such a huge army behind this. But in closing, I really believe we can improve special ed by eliminating the 10 assistant principals, because what would this would do is allow us to bring in more the individuals that I have put also resolutions in for, the OSS, the Domus family advocates, the special ed teachers, which we need many more. Let's see here, what else did I think? The 2 guidance counselors at the high school. I really believe if we're going to do our personal best and be effective as a district, we need those individuals back. And so just scroll a little bit more, Jen, there. So we do need to ask questions. We do need to follow recommendations, I believe, and focus groups are helpful too. And the ultimate goal is success for our students and staff. And so that's why I'm just putting it forward to you. I sent it earlier today, some of my reasoning behind it. What I'm noticing, some of the staff in Stamford have not worked outside of Stamford, so they've never seen other programs. But we really can make this effective, but I do not believe the assistant principals are going to make a difference. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other commentary from board members or administration? Yeah, Version.
Thank you. And Dr. Hammond, I really appreciate like your perspective and trying to find ways that we can add back the positions that, are cut. I don't think, I don't feel good about any of those proposed cuts. They all seem really essential. And I've been grappling with this because it does seem like a lot to add 10 administrators. But I will say, in visiting schools and in speaking with principals, even prior to this budget season, this issue has come up quite a bit. With our full-time, what we can consider now full-time APs, spending a couple of days a week in PPTs, and the trickle effect of then not really being able to focus on instructional leadership in our special ed programming in those classrooms and specialized programs or other SPED services, but also in our gen ed classrooms. And so I see this as a way to, one, allow who'll end up being the full-time AP, right, like the non-SPED AP, they will still spend time in PPTs is my understanding, but also be able to really do that instructional leadership work focused on gen ed classrooms. And we also have buildings where, in an ideal world, all of our administrators would be experts in special education. But that's not the case, right? And so, having an administrator in the building, at least one who does have a SPED background, I think will allow our programs to get better. Right now, it feels like we're focused very much on compliance and meeting just what it says in the IEP. Not to say that there's lots of work going on. I know there's a lot of focus, but in the absence of an administrator who really has a SPED background, I think that there's, a ceiling to how good these programs are going to be. We need more expertise in the buildings to really coach and develop teachers, provide professional development so that we can really get better. And my hope is that maybe, keep more of our kids in the district too, and offer even better programming so that we don't have quite as many out of district placements. So I think there's a trickle effect that could, be beneficial from this move. I'm not sure. And one question I have is kind of what will this look like at a school like, Roxbury, where there's apples, where there's quite a few kids who come in from private parochial schools, and we are responsible for their IEPs as well, as compared to a school that maybe doesn't have as much need. I don't know that everyone needs the exact same. And so that's something I'm curious about. But overall, I'm supportive of this move, and I think it'll actually have a positive impact on all of the students, special ed and gen ed.
Okay, thank you. Should we go to Gabriella first and then back to Dr. Hammond? Go ahead, Gabriella.
Thank you. No, thank you, Becky, for putting a lot of thought into this. I know it takes time to prepare for these things, and budgets are never easy. And I definitely echo a lot of sentiments that my colleague just shared. It's nobody ideally wants to make any cuts. And so I do think it's very tough, and we're presented with a very difficult task here tonight. But I think something for me, and coming from a perspective of not having the administrative experience and just like the educational experience that some folks in this call have, when I was listening to this testimony, which, was very impactful for me personally, I think something that I gathered from hearing from the folks that work in SPED in the PPT meetings was that case management is a huge aspect of this, right? I think really having to communicate with families, do the follow-up. I think paperwork was mentioned, right? But I think that level of having somebody there that you can be a point, right? Trusted point on issues that you're having with your case, how it's being managed, what paperwork needs to be done. I think there's a level there that having administrators, specifically for SPED, can really meet. And I do see a lot of benefit to that. We have parents that come, I think, that complain a lot, they'll say, we want more, people feel like they need more attention, and everybody wants to feel like they have more attention to them. And so I think really by adding more support on the case management level sounds like, for me, a really good idea for our families and students fundamentally. And so I do see this as a positive in terms of keeping administrators for SPED in this budget. I do believe that's my stance on this. And so I really wanted to echo that today and say that to you, Dr. Hammond, but I appreciate, again, your effort and thought put into this.
Okay, Becky again.
Thank you. I've done this for 14 years and I don't have a SPED background. I left left schools in 2021 because I have other responsibilities. So I'm very current with these software online programs. It can be done. You do not need a special ed background. I have a gifted ed background. So I disagree with administrators. I disagree that it's paperwork. It's in the details, but you have IEP compliance teachers working on that right now. And just because I did it for 14 years, I loved what I did. But it was very important that I was part of those PPTs, IEPs, simply because those were my kids. And if it ended up, with a disability, that sometimes with manifestations and BIPs, these are just terms that you use in special ed. I followed that child for 3 years or 4 years, whether I was at the middle school or high school level, and that family, and there was a relationship there. But you do not need administrators to make it work. You have plenty of skilled and talented individuals in this district, and $2 million is too much. The training has not been consistent across the board. You have not held, many of these individuals are not held accountable. I just disagree. The systems aren't in place. This is not a good way to start. I believe that's if we did an audit of some kind or focus groups, you would see very clearly from the army of teachers and administrators that do this, especially the PPS team individuals that are on those team on the ground with these parents consistently, that they're doing what they need to do. It's just we need to tighten it up. And the two questions that haven't been answered by this central office is, that again, I have to go to what and where are the problems? It's always a secret. And what data is driving our decision making to make a $2 million purchase? And I can only speak from experience in 14 years. I love what I did, and you do not need a special ed background to do this. The dotting of the I's, the crossing of the T's can be done by the IEP compliance or those PPS team members. They are strong and they're very well trained. But we have not had those questions answered from central office, as we do with a lot of other issues. We do not see data. We do not see analysis. You just continue to put more administrators into it. It's not going to solve our problem. I guarantee it.
Point of clarification, Dr. Hammond. You talk about 14 years, you were in special ed, but you weren't in special ed. I guess, could you give us a little bit of your resume so we know
Sure.
where you're coming from?
No, as an administrator,
Administrator where?
in a variety of districts.
Well, can you be specific?
No, I'm not going to be specific. I don't need to give you a personal background, but what I do know
Well, yeah, no,
is
but
I
you're
was
telling
in
14
charge.
years of experience
I
in
was the
special ed.
PPS
Well, you said you're an administrator, but where were you an administrator?
in a variety of districts.
Well, could you name one?
New Fairfield, which was very rural.
Okay, New Fairfield. And what was the years that you were there?
Middle school. And
Middle school, and for how long were you there?
4 years.
4 years.
It's
You
a
were
commute from
administrator?
Stamford, so I didn't want to keep commuting. But what happens when you're dealing with these smaller districts, and you can really see, this is a big district. Those smaller districts, we didn't have CES next to us. We had Ed Connection. And so a lot of those IEP meetings were involved with really just helping, the individual families in the area. But a lot of these jobs, I don't have a special ed background, but I learned how to do.
So what was your role as an administrator?
So I was evaluating teachers. That was my most.
No, I mean, what was your position in New?
I was an assistant
Fairfield?
principal. And
You're
so I
an assistant principal. An assistant principal.
and we had 700
at
kids in
middle
the
school?
building. We had 700 students. And so
700 students at a middle school or high school?
middle school. And then we had the high school connected to it. But
All right, but you weren't involved with special ed per se.
I was full-time into special ed. Meaning I evaluated if we had 700 students, I think it was about 30 teachers I had to evaluate. And then I don't know how the caseload, I'd have to backtrack here some of how many students, but I was in every IEP meeting or PPT meeting.
Okay. And could you tell me what years though that was?
That was 1900s.
In the 1900s?
I'm being funny because I shouldn't have to be put in a witness seat to tell you these stories.
No.
I was never a special ed. I'm not a certified special educator.
Who cited your experience and
That
said
was
you know everything.
early 2000s. So, the piece.
Any place else other than New Fairfield?
Yeah. But you know what? This isn't about me. This is about the district. This is about a central office making decisions. $2 million.
Well, in some sense, it's about you criticizing everything that's going on in the central office. So that's why I bring that in.
Have some pushback. You need to understand that a lot of these administrators have not been outside the district. They have not seen how this works in other districts. There are best practices across the state that Stamford does it a little different, which is fine. But we have not heard from the district central office what and where are the problems. So what they're going to do is put $2 million, 10 administrators in. They said they trained these last administrators. Some did well, some did not. The focus should be improving instruction. But when you have PPS teams in action and doing a great job, you shouldn't struggle like this. And it's a big district, but I'm just concerned about the systemic platforming here and how it's followed through. And so, I can have my own perspective, but I'm just telling you, sometimes when you step outside of your world and you step into other worlds, you do not need a special ed expert to do this. I learned it. I loved it. I loved my kids because many of them, as we traveled for 4 years, these were kids that had all kinds of disabilities, but our job was to help them be successful and help the classroom teachers be successful. But you need that PPS team to make it, to make it really stellar. And those are the stars that are working in the district that are very quiet. We're not hearing from them. So that's just, it's my perspective. This is Stamford Public Schools. I'm just sharing with you some other ideas. If the board doesn't like it, you can choose that. But I'm just saying there's other ways to make it work. And I'm concerned that it seems to be we got blinders on and we're only looking one way. And I asked to see the special ed director. I was not allowed to see it. Other board members can see other people in central office, but I was pushed out because I had specific questions I was not allowed to ask. So I did my best to put this together, but I was really surprised by central office. Why would they not want to have questions asked of them? That's it. I'm here to help. But if you did not like it and you only see it one way, that's your choice. But I disagree. We've got phenomenal teachers, IEP compliance. We've got phenomenal PPS team members that there's no input from them. And I wish you would hear more from them. That's it.
Mr. Larrabee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question. I don't know who can answer it, but do we have open SPED teacher positions that are not filled that we will not be filling and instead hiring the administrators?
Michael, do you know if we have open SPED positions at this time? Michael Fernandez, are you there?
We have,
We
can you hear me? We have.
Yeah, we can hear you, Amy.
Positions who have positions filled currently by contracted outside vendors because we have not been able to fill by hiring our own. So we've had to go to different vendors to get teachers like Hubbard, Stepping Stones, to name you.
And will those positions continue to be in the budget or will they be disappearing?
We do have a reduction in the special education teacher position next year. And that was done by looking at caseloads across the state, caseloads of our district. We are well below what the state average is and other districts that we are similar to, the districts in Fairfield County in terms of caseload numbers. So we're also, there's a wide variance in our district. So in trying to get everyone to have the same number and use a formula for caseloads, we are reducing special education teachers. Those will not likely result in any loss of job by a person. It will be the jobs that are not currently filled as well as contracted positions.
Okay, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I just want to understand this correctly because I think it's very important. So if I understand the answer correctly, we are reducing the number of SPED teachers because the caseload is reducing. Did I hear that correctly? Because in the budget presentation, I heard the exact opposite. I heard that our special ed demands are going to grow significantly into the future. So now I may have heard incorrectly, but I need clarification. If someone can please clarify that.
Well, speaking
Not
of the,
you,
the budget, sorry, I'm talking over you, Amy.
Oh. No, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say the focus of the budget presentation was largely out of district costs as a large driver. There wasn't a lot of specific in next year's budget about special education teachers, what Mrs. Baldati is referring to.
So if our out-of-district placements are growing, how does that square with what I just heard, which was the caseload is decreasing, and therefore we can decrease the number of sped teachers? Something is not making sense here.
I don't think Mrs. Baldati said that the caseload is decreasing. I think what she was saying is that our current caseload is, what's the word? Compared to the state average, our caseloads are lower. And to bring them more in line with the state average, we don't need the same number of special education teachers for the same number of students.
But yet we're spending more money on out-of-district placements. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Mungie South.
Oh, no, I'm done. Thanks.
Okay. Is there any more discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes, Ms. Hammond.
You know, and I thank you, Mr. Lirabina, for asking those questions. I think what's happening too, that, you know, they're not doing full disclosure here. You have a lot of teachers who are out sick, you know, and or maternity leave or other issues. And what happens is the special ed teacher then has to cover for those individuals the other sped teachers. And so I think these are bigger questions that sometimes it's easy just to say we need to spend big bucks to bring in these leaders, which I have no doubt we have some very talented ones that would be applying for this job. But I just think we can do it better. And sometimes it takes some time to put some thought into it. And that's why I took the time to do it, because I know it from another angle. And I know how well special ed can work. And I think they have struggled, which is, who doesn't struggle? The caseloads are going up, but what happens in identification, so we're at about 15%, 10 to 15%, it rolls back and forth, but we can solve this. We can, the only other thought is you table it and research it yourselves, but I understand we need to make the decision tonight. But I really, in my heart, I know it can be done differently. And I have reached out to the Army to ask lots of questions. And when you do that, you come up with phenomenal ideas. And this is coming from Stamford Public Schools staff. I spent my time the last 2-3 weeks researching it from other angles. I've been an administrator. I want to hear from the teachers, and that's what I took time to do. I want to hear from PPS, and that's what I took the time to do. And I really think we can do it from another angle, because what happens, other things get cut that are extremely important to kids. And that's why I really wanted to spend time with the special ed department, but I was pushed away. So I'm just telling you, I was a little surprised. I would love to help, you know, troubleshoot this with you, but these are my best ideas. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments on the proposed amendment? Okay, hearing none, then let's take the proposed amendment to a vote. All those in favor of the amendment, which would eliminate the 10 proposed special education assistant principal positions, indicate by voting Yes, if you want to eliminate them. All those in favor of the that administrative? We have 1, 2, 3. All those opposed, please indicate. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 3 in favor, 6 opposed, and that would be leave none abstaining. So the amendment fails. Okay, moving on to Amendment 2. The Board of Education amends the 2025-26 operating budget resolution as presented by the superintendent by increasing the salary and benefit accounts for teachers by $638,742 and 8 FTEs. And so again, this is to maintain 6 special education teachers and 2 high school counselors, just to be clear. Is someone going to move that resolution? Moved by Ms. Hammond. Do we have a second? A second by Mr. Hyman. Discussion. Ms. Hammond.
To jump between buttons here. Again, I don't know where the money's going to come from now that we're spending $2 million. And so this, again, I just, I put it forward because we really, more special ed teachers, there's creative ways to hire them. And again, we didn't explore that. Now we're using expensive administrators. But my concern is here you have 2 guidance counselors and you have 6 special ed teachers that we could help bring into the fold. But now you've cut them because I don't know how we replace it unless magically money shows up on our doorstep. So I'm going to still vote for this, but I don't know where the money's going to come from.
Okay. Other comments? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. Then voting on the second amendment to increase the salary and benefit accounts by $638,742 and 8 FTEs. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye, raising your hand. We have 3 in favor. All those opposed, indicate by raising hand. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mr. Chair, I'd raise my hand in with yes. I'm sorry. I
With
think you were
support.
looking down. Thank you.
Okay. So support. So that's 4 in favor. I think that's 4 opposed, I believe.
I did raise for the yes.
You vote yes, Mr. Tunga?
Yes. Can you see my hand or no?
Usually I can. Yes, you're on my screen. So I'm sorry. Just maybe I.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay, let's just to be sure. Let us redo this. Let's start at the beginning. All those in favor of increasing the budget by $638,742 and keeping the 8 FTEs. All those in favor. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now we have 5. I'm sorry, maybe didn't see that before. Opposed are 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So the amendment passes 5-4-0. So the budget now goes up to, let me put this in. I have a spreadsheet here just to be sure. 638,742. Why is that not working? All right, well, I'll work on my spreadsheet later, but all right. So we're adding 638,000 to the budget based on that amendment too. Okay. So that brings back the 6 special education teaching positions and 2 high school counselors. Right. Moving on to a submitted amendment. Number 3, the Board of Education amends the 2025-26 operating budget resolution presented by the superintendent by increasing the budget $1 million. This is to maintain free meals for all students. Is someone going to move that motion? Motion moved by Ms. Munchie South and seconded by Ms. Koch. Okay. Sounds good. Discussion? Yes, Ms. Koch?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that this amendment would be beneficial to our students at our schools. We know that we have a significant amount of students that qualify for free reduced lunch, but on top of that, I think something that is important to know is that the income limits and just the eligibility requirements for being able to apply for this, which is a process you would have to do, right? An application process would have to be provided if we don't provide this. A lot of folks are going to be left out of those requirements to be eligible for this program. I do believe it's important to pass a budget that at least, I feel is going to be representative and provide the resources that the students are going to need. And so I don't have a figure on exactly how many students would be still struggling to maintain school lunches, maybe potentially going into student debt. But I do know that the federal poverty limit eligibility requirement for this is very significantly low. Just kind of giving you one example, just for my colleagues to get some insight on that, you have to be between 130% to 185% of the federal poverty limit. If we're looking at a household of 3, you're looking at 33,566 annual income for a household of 3. That's 130% of the poverty limit. If you're looking at 185% of the poverty limit for a family size of 3, you're looking at about 47,767. And so these requirements are essentially very low. I just know that, if we do encourage folks to apply for this, we're going to still be leaving out a huge group of students and families that would really benefit from having this free lunch program. And so I'll just leave it at that. I really hope we have support from our colleagues on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tonga.
Yeah, I just have a question, right? So to give free lunch to everyone, we are spending $1 million more on the budget, right? So is there no way to really increase the poverty limit? Like Mr. Koch mentioned, is it instead of just going 130% over the national poverty line, go 180%. So you include more students, but instead of giving it to 100%, like somebody who's a millionaire, why are we giving free lunch to them by spending when we are so tight on budget? So are there other ways of making sure that everyone who deserves gets it, but not give it to 100% of the people?
These are federal requirements in terms of who's eligible to do that. So we can't necessarily adjust that. I think I'll leave it at that. I don't know if that answers your question, Mr. Tungo.
So just a follow-up question, right? So if we said that if we go back to letting the students or the families apply for free lunch, you said some qualified students would be left behind, that they won't get the free lunch because they're making over $35,000 as families, right? Is that?
Yeah, the example was a family size of 3, and that was at 130% of the federal poverty limit. Yeah.
Right. So you're basically saying that the federal poverty limit is at a wrong level, right? That's
super low. Yes, I think.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
family of
So-
3. I think.
Okay. So we definitely, obviously, from Stamford can't adjust that. But my question is that if we enforce the free lunch program only through application, do we know what percentage of people who we think deserve it? Let's say in our minds, it's like, okay, $50,000 a year, you still need free lunch, or $60,000 a year, you still need free lunch, whatever it is we are thinking. Do you have a percentage? Like, are we leaving out 10% of the people, 50% of the people? Do we have numbers?
I don't have a number. I don't know if the administration can have something for that, but I do know that a way to look at this is United Way identifies these households that we're talking about as Atlas households. They're asset limited, income constrained. Forgot what the E stands for. Excuse me. But they're essentially, they do measure these metrics. I don't have that number for you today, but if you circle back to me, I can do some quick research online. I'm sure they have that figure published. I'm not sure if it would be Connecticut, Stanford based, but I'm sure they have one at least for Connecticut.
I think the E is employed. But
Thank
I
you.
would also say that a lot what you're asking for, Prasad, the data on people's income levels only cuts off when people stop self-reporting. So you're not going to know what the level of income is above that threshold because people are not reporting necessarily. So
Okay. Okay, so I think just one last comment on that is that there was a in one of the previous meetings, somebody mentioned that actually enforcement also costs us some money. Is that true? Can anybody say that, okay, if we just say free lunch for all and spend $1 million, the budget is going up by $1 million. If you actually enforce it by saying, okay, please apply and the application process, is there a cost to the district, or is that just like we feel some deserving people will be left out because they either forget to apply or they just don't qualify even though they're low income? So does anybody can answer the question of, is there an actual cost of enforcing this through application process? And what is the cost?
Prasad, I can probably best answer your question, although I'm not quite sure that I understand the two scenarios. But let me talk through for a moment. The scenario where we remain on free lunch for all has a cost, and actually that cost is about $1.25 million. Right? That's the difference between the revenue that we receive from the federal government and the expense to run the program on free lunch for all. That's the gap, about $1.25 million. If we go off of free lunch for all and revert back to what the district was doing pre-COVID, we estimate that the operating budget would have to contribute about $250,000 to make up the gap between revenue and expenses. So that's where the $1 million comes from. It's looking at those two scenarios. And the reason that we would have the operating budget would still have to contribute in the event that we went off of free lunch is because we estimate that there would be substantial, what you refer to as lunch debt, which is students have had 5 years of being able to get breakfast and lunch without cost. And we project, based on conversations with our colleagues from around the state, that they would continue to eat, which is what we want. But we assume that they would not pay, and their families would not necessarily pay, either because they couldn't or they wouldn't, or that's just the reality. And we are required to close that gap locally. We're not allowed to use federal dollars or lunch fund dollars to close that gap. So the $1 million is the estimate of the difference between the two scenarios, free lunch for all versus qualified lunch.
Thank you.
okay, Ms. Muncie South.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to say, and I think what Prasad's questions are getting at sort of is like, do we end up then paying for a substantial number of families who could afford to pay for lunch? And I think that that's a reasonable concern. There are certainly plenty of families in Stamford who can afford to provide, to pay for lunch. I think the concern here for me is, one, filling out the forms. We're living in a the time that we're living in now, there's a lot of fear around filling out forms. So I don't feel very confident that a lot of our families are going to fill out the forms and provide the kind of information that these forms are asking, given decisions that are being made by our federal government and giving just the culture of fear that we're living in right now. So that's one. But the other piece is that, again, we've been used to not paying for lunch. I think the last time I paid for my kids' lunch was, they're in high school now, and I haven't paid since they were in elementary school. So whether or not you could afford it, I do think that there's going to be a large number of families who just aren't used to it, haven't budgeted for it, and won't pay. And then as Gabby was saying, there are quite a few families that are on the edge. Maybe they're fine right now, but one car accident, one medical, emergency, they're that close to not being able to afford it, especially with how expensive other things are now. So it is quite a bit of money, but I do think that, all of our kids knowing and all of our families knowing that they can get meals at school is a communication of our values, of what we care about as a community, and acknowledgement of the intense needs that we have in our community. So I will be supporting this. Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Hammond.
Yeah, and I think, it's the stigma that comes with this. We have 55% free and reduced lunch. So those students will automatically get a free lunch. So we're not cutting that. And so it's the 45% that we'd be paying for with this $1 million. So I just think, there are creative ways to get around that stigma, whether you use an ID card or whatever. I mean, you walk into these cafeterias and they've got cameras everywhere. So I don't see why that could be a problem. We are a sanctuary state. Let's put it out there. And I think part of that is the issue that the paperwork doesn't want to be filled out. So, whether it rests on 9 votes, if this is something that the state wants to put forward, then maybe our legislators need to consider that. And it has been at the legislative level. So I need to put that out there, because is it fair for all kids to, feel like they're being the stigma that goes with it? These are questions that we need to ask, but our legislators too have also asked. And I think maybe this needs to come from the state. Maybe this is something that we need to say, hey, and refer it to our legislators, because they want to be a sanctuary state.
If I can just address your point, Dr. Hammond, I think something I have asked these questions at the legislative level. I work in Hartford, and I do try to ask these questions when I can, because it's pertinent to our work here on the Board of Ed. And the overwhelming sentiment from the legislature seems to be, not speaking for our delegation specifically, I'm saying the appetite for the legislature currently on this is that there are a lot of municipalities that they feel can absorb these costs. And again, with the stigma you seem to mention about us paying for millionaires' kids' school lunches, right? And there's a stigma because Stamford, is in Lower Fairfield County, and we have high property values, right? We have a large grand list that we don't necessarily serve, right? These households that are on edge of like one disaster away from not being able to afford this. And so there's a piece of that element playing to the appetite for passing something like this at the state level. And so that's the only thing I can offer to you in terms of why state action on this seems to be at least not a priority for this session, I'll say.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Koch. Mr. Larabina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just again, point of clarification, maybe Ryan could answer this. I was under the impression that the reason the superintendent's budget did not include this is because the funds were federal funds and dried up, and now we're backfilling that. Is what is happening here?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So prior to COVID, Stamford operated under a normal lunch regime where families had to qualify for free or reduced lunch. During COVID, the lunch fund specifically was the recipient of significant federal aid. The federal government reimbursed Stamford and all districts for every single meal that we served at the highest reimbursement rate. So the lunch fund built up a surplus. The lunch and the federal government also allowed us to provide all students with free meals during COVID without anyone filling out an application. So those two things happened during COVID. When COVID ended, the federal government no longer allowed all districts to provide free meals to all students without filling out applications. However, a program exists called CEP, which allows individual districts to do that. CEP is not financially sustainable for Stamford. It results in operating losses. But because of the surpluses that the lunch fund had received during COVID, we've been able to cover those operating losses for the last several years. And that surplus has now dwindled to the point where if we want to continue under this program, we need a separate funding source from the operating budget.
And what program is that?
What program?
What you mean, the lunch program? It's what I'm getting at is this. It's been suggested that we establish some sort of criteria to participate in the free lunch program. And I heard in the discussion that we have to follow federal regulations and guidelines with respect to that. But if we're funding this ourselves, why are we subject to those guidelines? If it's not federal money, we could establish whatever guidelines we want.
Well, it is federal money. If you think about the lunch program, to operate the entirety of the program costs something like $9 million, right? That's the entirety of all of the labor and food and kitchen operations. And federal reimbursements, when we're not under CEP, are expected to bring in $8 million next year, give or take. So the federal government is providing essentially all of the revenue in the program, but the revenue is insufficient to cover the costs of the program. So that's why Stamford would be stepping in with the last $1 million.
So it's still federal funds. It's just not from the same federal source. Is that what I'm hearing? It was COVID's federal. No, superintendent's shaking her head. No,
it was always the same source, but during COVID, it's always from the USDA. But during COVID, the USDA reimbursed us for every meal that we served at the highest reimbursement rate, right? So say a meal costs $3 to produce and serve, they would reimburse us at the highest rate, maybe $3.60, right? So the program could operate financially sustainably and generate a surplus. But under normal circumstances, they may reimburse us $2.60 for that $3 meal. So that's why the program is not financially sustainable. It's always been just the USDA. It's just that the USDA changed the way that they operated during COVID and no longer operate that way.
So it's the reimbursement rate that's changed.
That's the major change, the reimbursement rate, yeah.
Has changed. Okay, but it's still federal funds.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Antonia.
Thank you, Andy. I am in support of this. I am a true believer that every child deserves a free lunch and meal regarding their income. High income, low income, meals should be given to everybody there. Second, I would like Mrs. Becky Hammond to please stop using the language about that this is a that this is I'm blanking with the word. Gabby, help me with
sanctuary state. Sanctuary state.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The sanctuary state. Sorry, I just blank with that. Because it doesn't matter if it's or not. It is all about the children. It's about offering them the best education, and children learn when their tummy is full. And that is something that we should never start, bringing up. If it is or if it's not, we cannot deny food to any child, regarding where they come from. At the same time, many families won't fill it up application and asking all the private information, how much do they make or not. This is something that it should be given to every child. I don't care 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, food should be there. Maybe we should increase the budget. That's what we should be thinking about it. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Foy?
Yes, I'm also in support of this proposal. I agree with some of the things that have already been said. I want to caution us from using that word deserve in the sense of that all children do deserve, I agree, deserve an opportunity and should be well fed. For many children in our district, the breakfast and lunch that they receive at school is one of 2 meals that they receive through the entire day. And if we are focused on student success, the success of any child, for any adult, for anyone, is that you are well fed. And that is just part of our basic needs. And that's during the school year as well as also through the summer. And so I just want to caution us in using that word deserve in trying to decide who does and who doesn't, who are the haves and the have-nots. I truly believe in this case and where we are in Stamford, that all of our children have and do deserve to benefit from a free lunch program for everyone. And when we're looking at sort of those federal numbers and those guidelines, all it takes is, it's $1 or $5 that makes a difference between who qualifies and who doesn't qualify. And in the county that we live in, that's significant in an income. And I think to what Ms. Munchie South had mentioned, it is, the difference between, someone getting really sick and being laid off, someone having a medical emergency and can no longer work. It could be, the passing of a spouse or a partner that can easily change, someone's income in a minute. And so if we can alleviate some of the stress that is going on in the world right now for our families, this is an opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hammond?
Thanks. I'm not the fiscal chair, but I know I've been here for a while, and trying to pass a budget can be really hard. What's happening now, I can see there are all kinds of things pulling our heartstrings. We also are building 4 schools. And so this is going to go to the Board of Finance and the Board of Reps. And so if we're going to need another million, what's going to go? Teachers, how about that? So I guess I always I'm a capitalist. I like to look at creative ways. We got NGOs, we've got faith communities. There's other creative ways to pay for this. So at this point, I'm not going to support it because I want to balance our budget. Or if this is going to go forward, something else has to go. That's why I asked for cutting 10 special ed administrators, because I gave you another creative way to look at it. That's it. I want to be supportive of everyone, but I'm looking out for that taxpayer who elected me. And if we're building 4 schools, we're, building the plane, what has to give? Well, we might as well just get rid of teachers then, I guess. How are we going to pay for all this? And that's going to be up to Andy, because at this point we're over budget. So it goes back to, I'm assuming, Dr. Lucero. So I'm asking us as a team, we're going to have to, if food is priority, which I agree 1,000%, I'm not even questioning that, but it becomes an issue where something else has to go. And Board of Finance has told us 3% is the top. So if we take another million, 2 million for administrators, another million for food, something has to go. I'm just putting it out there so you're aware of the details.
Okay, Thank you, Mr. Hyman.
Well, obviously, the idea of a free lunch cuts both ways with many of us. And having been a child of a free lunch program myself, having lived in a household where that extra dollar might make a difference between whether we ate that night or whether we didn't. We have people in our community, and I think it's been explained before, that there are a certain number of families that automatically qualify for a free and reduced lunch. It was also mentioned that there are a certain number of families that are the Alice population, as it is commonly known, that struggle, and they make up a large percentage. In fact, the majority of our students in Stamford schools are either a part of the free and reduced lunch or of the Alice population. That's a fact. And so that we're concerned about whether someone whose family is a part of the other side of the median income over $250,000 may be getting a free lunch, and that may forebode problems for that other child not getting one. I just simply think that we have to find a way. Like Mrs. Hammond, I am a protector of the taxpayers. Many of those taxpayers, in fact, all of the people who voted for me, somehow or another pay taxes to either the city of Stamford, to the state, or to the federal government. So we're all here looking out for them, and we're trying to make sure that there's a school environment that allows our young people to study and to be a part of that. A meal is certainly a short list item for a school environment. And so I'll be supporting the effort there. I will note that we are not over budget. The constraints that exist at this point is that, yes, we do have a political consideration and a fiscal consideration with our finance board about what is the right number for us to come in at. And that will be something that we will need to struggle with and we will be challenged by. But tonight is not necessarily the night to determine where those cuts will come if they're necessary. Right now, we're talking about what environment do we want to have for our schools and whether we should consider free lunches as a part of the short list of things that should be in those buildings. So again, each of you will have to search your souls and decide how to vote on this, but I will be in favor of finding, however we might, the $1 million to cover this.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments? Mr. Larabina?
Thank you. I think we all agree that this is worthwhile to provide lunch. But to some of the speakers' comments, it's a question of how we pay for it. I say this last year, and I'm going to say it again. I don't believe we have the ability to spend. I heard this tonight, and I heard it last year. Spend whatever. That is an irresponsible position to take. I said this last year, and I'm going to say it again. Stamford is a diverse community. We assume, because of our grand list, that everyone can afford to pay any amount in their taxes. That's not the case. We have a lot of people in Stamford who struggle to pay their taxes, and yet they do. So it's irresponsible to say, spend whatever. The only way I could support this is if someone tells me here tonight what we're cutting, not what we're cutting down the road or what we're relying on the Board of Finance and the Board of Representatives to cut. We're elected to manage this budget before it goes to the Board of Finance. So it doesn't look like it makes a difference because the votes are there to do this. But if you want my vote, you have to tell me tonight where that $1 million is coming from. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just kind of want to say something about kind of how I respect a lot of my colleagues' remarks about, really thinking about, where something else needs to come from in order to fund a line item. And I think that that is a very, rational and valid point to make for this. And I think something that Mr. Hyman mentioned was, we are here as a Board of Education, right? I think while we do have a responsibility to pass a budget that we believe is prioritizing students and staff in our district, our public schools, I also think that, I think that we need to caution from really doing the work of other bodies of governance that are tasked with that exact responsibility. I can't opine here on, where other revenues are going to come from to fund XYZ items, not just with our school budget, but I think the city budget as a whole, right? We are part of a larger budget. And so I just caution from toting that line a little bit too much. And I think that there's a fine balance in that. And I'll just echo here that, this is something that I believe is pertinent to our students here for their success and their ability to learn and succeed in our district. And so that's just my final say on this. That's all I'll say on this piece. Thank you for indulging me tonight.
Okay. My comment on this topic would be, again, I look at this as sort of two problems, and they're commingling here. One is there's a process problem about getting people to sign up that need to sign up for this and would be eligible, separately from what are we covering here? And so that's why I'm caught in more of a, it looks to me like there's two different there's a process issue, trying to get the people who are entitled to this benefit to sign up, as opposed to those who need it, and those who don't need it. Even if it's only 20% of our student population, that still seems like it's going to amount to a certain amount of money. So anyway, those are my comments. Are there any other comments on this proposed amendment? Okay, hearing none, let's take it to a vote. So the vote will be all those in favor of increasing the operating budget by $1 million to provide for free meals for all students. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Everybody on the board. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3. 3, and therefore no abstentions. So the motion passes 6-3-0. And my spreadsheet is working. Whoops, is working. The operating budget is now up to $348,746,867. Yeah.
You mean million, right?
I added $1 million, yeah.
Oh.
The full $1 million. Okay. All right, thank you. Moving on to Amendment 4. The Board of Education amends the 2025-26 operating budget. Resolution is presented by the superintendent by increasing the budget by $1.5 million for medical insurance premiums, which when added to the prior estimate expense brings the increase to approximately 11% for this account. Also move. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Hyman. Thank you. I'll launch into this first, and then if Mr. Feely wants to comment, or other people from the board. So normally when we try and estimate how much the medical insurance is going to go up, it is a bit of a guess, because the state partnership plan over time has kind of been a little bit volatile in how they determine what goes up. So we were assuming an 8%, unless Mr. Feely corrects me, it was about an 8% increase. But now we're getting a little bit closer to their May deadline when they actually tell us the real number. And now it seems like it's going to be closer to somewhere between 10 and 13%. So on Mr. Feely's recommendation, we picked 11%, and that is what the 1.5 million represents. The 1.5 million is an increase to the budget to cover what we think the real medical insurance premiums are going to cost. Should they come in lower, obviously that gives us room. If they come in higher, we then wind up trying to find the dollars, or we wind up going to the Board of Finance for an appropriation, special appropriation. So that is the background. It's been moved and seconded. Is there further discussion? Okay. Yes, Ms. Hammond.
It's contractual, right? This is already tied into the contract?
No, this is an estimate.
So it could go up or down. You're saying it's 11% now, so.
We're bringing the estimated increase to 11%, but it could be below or it could be above.
So it's might be an average there, right?
We're trying to bring it closer to what Mr. Feely believes is going to be the real result.
The real deal. And that was forgotten when we did the budget, or I'm confused?
No, he previously
Smile.
he previously used 8%, which was a reasonable expectation given on the last couple of years of experience. And this time, and the state partnership plan has always been a bit of a black box because we don't know. It really depends on the number of claims that they get. It's in a sense a self-insured program, and so if there's a big run on insurance claims, suddenly you may have a bigger increase than you anticipated. If it's lower, then you get the benefit of not having so many claims.
All right, thank you.
Are there any questions on this amendment? Okay, hearing none, let's take this then to a vote. All those in favor of increasing the budget by $1,500,000 to increase the medical insurance premiums account. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand, yay or nay. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I see 7 yay. Those opposed? I see 1 opposed. I see 2 opposed. Okay. So we have 7 in favor, 2 opposed, nobody abstaining. So this passes. So the budget will now increase by $1.5 million. Thank you. Did I do this right? Yes. The budget is now up to the operating budget is now up to $350,246.87. Okay, moving on to the next submitted amendments. This is where it gets maybe a little confusing. Amendments 5 and 6 are somewhat related because they're the OSS positions. The first amendment proposed is going to add money to the budget to cover the some OSS positions. The second adds OSS positions but reduces special education assistant principal positions to keep the budget neutral. So we sort of have these two operating. If Amendment 5 passes, we really don't need to do Amendment 6. Okay, so Amendment 5 is that the Board of Education amends the 2025-26 operating budget resolution as presented by the superintendent by increasing the salary and benefit accounts for clerical technical employees, $468,000 and 6 FTEs. Do I have a motion? A motion by Ms. Hammond. Do I have a second? A second by Ms. Foy. Okay, discussion. Yes, Ms. Munchie South.
Thank you. I support reinstating the OSS positions, but given where we are with the budget so far, I believe we need to offset the cost now by reducing other positions. So I do support adding in those positions back for elementary school, but won't be supporting this amendment specifically.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to echo my colleague's sentiments there. I didn't see, and obviously where we are now, I think I would not be supporting this either. And I actually submitted this amendment. So if that means anything to anyone here. So I will not be supporting this amendment either, but I'm looking forward to amendment number 6.
Okay, thank you. But and let me just say right at the outset, again, we make these changes now, but everything has to still go through the other boards, and we will probably, I'm going to guess, be back to making some of these same decisions in May about moving these dollars around. So that's just a point of order. Ms. Hammond?
Yeah. So, oh, I see. Okay, so the first, oh, see, I'm in charge. I think, the first one, this is where I'm getting at. So now you see what happens when you get towards the end of the budget, and all these different resolutions being put in. I truly feel that these are vital positions in a school, and my number one reason is for safety. These are an extra set of eyes. If you look at Newtown and what happened, these individuals were in the front office. These are the ones that make the difference. And so I'm all for, I guess it's 6 and 2, right? Increasing the salary benefits. Okay. Yeah. So I'm for bringing them all back on. And I'm sad that, when they went out and did their investigation for the Welcome Center, that they didn't ask how that was, did they pull secretaries from other, OSS from other buildings, or how that happened. But I have been in the buildings too long, and these are vital to the safety of our kids. And they're also there to be a welcoming person for kids. And, so I'm going to be supporting it. But the issue is what's going to be cut. And now you guys, for some of you who are new here, this becomes a bigger issue. That's why I put in, we can do other creative ways without these administrators. So, because all these little people, the ones that are making a huge difference, are going to be cut. So anyways, I'll be supporting it.
I would resist calling them little people, but okay. Any other comments, Ms. Koch?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just want to clarify something quickly, just because I see there's a lot of folks on the call, and a lot of them are OSSs themselves. And so I just want to clarify, this amendment is not cost neutral, and it reinstates 6 OSS positions. I will not be supporting this, and I actually proposed this one. I'm looking to support another amendment that does reinstate the elementary school OSS positions that is cost neutral. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? All right, then taking proposed amendment number 5, which reinstates the 6 OSS positions. It's $468,000 increase to the budget, 6 FTEs. All those in favor of that indicate by saying yay and raising your hand. We have 1, 2, 2. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. I count 7, and no abstentions. Okay. The motion on amendment number 5 fails. 2 in favor, 7 opposed, and 0 abstaining. So now, because of that, we move on to amendment number 6, which does also relate to the OSS positions. The Board of Education amends the 2025-26 operating budget resolution as presented by the superintendent by increasing the salary and benefit accounts for the clerical technical employees by $390,000 and 5 FTEs, and reducing the similar accounts for administration certified by $390,000 and 2 FTEs. Also moved. Do we have a second? A second by Ms. Foy. Discussion. I'll start off with discussion. I agree with the importance of these positions. It is difficult for me to suggest a decrease in the administrative positions at the APs because I know how important that is. But again, one of these situations where I think maybe gradually growing the AP positions may be better at the same time as holding on to the OSS positions until we see how the Welcome Center works out may be a more conservative way to go. So I'm happy to support this resolution. Other comments? Mr. Tonga.
Yeah, did I hear correctly that there are 7 new full-time positions added even with this amendment? Or 5?
No. The superintendent's operating budget as presented had proposed a reduction in OSS positions.
Okay,
This
so 5 FTEs are being cut here. That's the proposal?
No. The superintendent's budget proposed a total of 6 OSS positions be reduced. And there's moving parts because some were being reassigned to the Welcome Center, but in net 6 were being reduced. This motion says we want to bring back 5 of those positions because those are spread across the elementary schools.
I see. Okay. So we're basically amending what was proposed. Okay.
Yes, we're amending what was proposed. Yes.
Okay.
And then to pay for that or to offset that cost, reducing the assistant principals in SPED that have been proposed as an increase, reducing those FTEs by 2. That makes it a budget neutral resolution.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. Foy.
I can't remember if this was my proposal or not, but
It was sort of yours.
sort of. I feel like they kind of all melded into each other. No, I am in support of this. And I think as we all have recognized that and know full on that OSS are the heart and soul of the school. They are definitely the face for the building and for the schools as parents come in for children on a day-to-day basis and supporting and meeting their needs. That goes well beyond just simply doing clerical work. And so I think it is important and necessary to maintain those positions.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Larabina.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, and I know it's getting late, but could you explain again how this is cost neutral?
Cost neutral because in the superintendent's proposed budget, the OSS positions were being taken out. The the assistant principals for SPED were being added. And what this is doing is sort of readjusting between those two things. So instead of taking 5 of those OSS positions out, leave them in the budget. In other words, reinstate the 5 positions. And with regard to the administrative principals, reduce the proposed increase, reduce it by 2 FTEs. 2 administrative principals equates to $390,000, which covers 5 OSS positions, which means we can maintain the OSSs at the elementary schools.
And do we know what the impact is of reducing the SPED principals by 2? I mean, what's the impact of that? I mean, I like the idea that we're looking to cover costs, but what's the impact of doing that?
I don't know if someone from the administration wants to speak to that. It certainly is going to stretch the new AP SPED positions thinner, in the sense that they would have to cover more locations or be more strategically deployed. But I don't know if Dr. Lucero or Mr. Feely have any comment on that.
Can you hear me? I don't know. This is Mrs. Beldotti.
Okay, yeah, Ms. Beldotti.
Hi. So to Mr. Larabino's question, we had already sort of had a plan for some of these APs to be in 2 different buildings supporting. I think Mrs. Munchie South said it earlier. Roxbury, for an example, is a school that has specialized programs, so they'd be looking at probably having a AP for special education 3 days a week, whereas a school like Davenport that doesn't have any specialized programs, potentially pairing up in 2 days a week. If the reduction of these positions would require, I don't really even know what we would do.
Yeah, Amy, I don't think we can speak about this at this time. I think we've got to reevaluate the whole plan. Tonight we just can't come up with a new plan for
the whole plan.
It would be impossible for us to say today. So we'll see where the number of special ed assistant principals lands at by the end of the evening. And then my team will get back together and determine what next steps will be.
I appreciate that answer. And, since we don't know, for that reason, I can't support this. Thank you.
Any other comments on this resolution? Let's take it to a vote then. All those in favor of, it's a budget neutral, so we're increasing the OSS's account, the clerical technical employees, by 390,000 and 5 FTEs, which maintains the elementary OSS's, and reducing the administration certified by 390,000, which is 2 of the proposed SPED AP positions. So all those in favor of this amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I see 6. Those opposed? 1, 2. I see 2. Is someone abstaining? Mr. Hyman abstaining. So 6-1. So this amendment passes 6-1. So we will make the adjustments, but it's budget neutral. So it doesn't change the amount of the operating budget as amended. Right, we're moving into our last set of proposed amendments, and then if there are any from the floor, we will deal with them. Amendment 7 or 8 are very much like the last 2 that we just handled, because they handle the Domus advocates. And the first one is to increase the budget to cover those, the Domus advocates at the middle school. The second one is to reduce another SPED assistant principal to cover the cost, to make it budget neutral. So very much similar. So first, Amendment 7. The Board of Education amends the 2025-26 operating budget resolution is presented by the superintendent by reinstating the contract with Domus Family Advocates by increasing the budget $280,000. Do I have a motion? A motion by Ms. Hammond, a second? A second by Ms. Koch. Discussion. Yes, Ms. Koch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment essentially, I think is really important. I think on top of talking about OSSs and the support they give as just front staff to our students and families, I think when you think about Domus advocates at the middle schools specifically, they have produced a lot of work. I know there's information circulating in our emails about the data behind that, how they're improving upon attendance. I do think they have a very special impact when we talk about passing a budget that families and students can actually feel. I think a lot of the things that we talk about at our level, we understand the impact and importance of, but I think this is a good example of another item, right? We've talked about a few tonight, but this is another example of ways that families and students can directly feel the impact of our budgets, right? And what we pass. They have strong relationships in the community. They have been working well beyond what their contracts do say that they need to do to support students. I've heard stories of them driving to pick up students to go drop them off, parents who just relied and have actually received some financial support on a personal level from them. They buy kids lunches. They do much more than what any contract, can say officially. But I do think this is a really crucial contract for us to seek to renew. The reason why I'd say to support this is, I do think there's something to be said about reducing the sped admins any further. I think I'm trying to be conscious of being neutral in terms of impact, but I do think this is an example of where a trade-off between Adomas advocates and reducing sped admins might not really be in the best interest here if we choose to pursue that any further. But I hope people support this amendment today and see the value that the Adomas advocates have for our middle school students. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hammond?
But yeah, and what I'm going to say is I had several moms growing up and several dads. And that's what I look at these as, thank God these are the individuals that, come in there and they help you walk through your journey of life. And they do it very well with parents and the greater, family of these students. So again, I'm going to support this 100% because I still would hope that, once we finalize this budget, that we'll go back and say, here we go. So meaning I think we should fund them 100%. I don't think we should, at this point, cut any administrators. I believe we should cut all 10 administrators. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Muncy-South.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just echo, the good work that Domus is doing in our community and add in that they have a robust program in our high school that they bring in the funding for, and that's millions of dollars. So while this is, a few $100,000 to support our middle school kids, they're such an important partner to us. And specifically focusing on things like attendance, which I know is a priority for our district and our most vulnerable students. And again, similar to the SPED administrators, there are students who I firmly believe without the support of Domus would end up with an out-of-district placement. And so we have to think about sort of the big picture of the overall experience for our students. And for some of our students, that is the one adult in the building who they're excited to see and who they know are supporting them. So I fully support this amendment.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Foy?
Yes, just to quickly echo what's already been said, but Domus Family Advocates just, have a history of, providing wraparound services that ensure that, children and families receive the resources that they need to overcome any challenges and obstacles. It also, especially for our children and youth who are most at risk, and by breaking down a lot of those systemic barriers that they may come across. Again, also offering the mental health and the emotional support that's needed. And last week we had several parents speak to the success of their children who were at one point struggling, but because of the involvement and the engagement of Domus Family Advocates, have been able to be incredibly successful in not just going forward from middle school, but going through high school and even getting support beyond that, and are now contributing to the community. So I am in full support of maintaining this very important program.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Better-Wertz?
I echo the same sentiments. I support the Domus. I just wanted to say one little story. I was once out downtown having lunch, lunch, or I was eating outside, and then suddenly were two of the advocates from Doma School, and knew somebody, and the reason, what are you around? He said, no, because we're checking to making sure that some of the children who are in specific area getting back to the school or something like that. And to me, that was just something that it touched to my heart. And I think they do a lot more than people think. They go to their homes, they do a lot of things into the community, and thanks to them, also the children are in the classroom.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on amendment number 7? Then let's take it to a vote on this amendment number 7. The Board of Education amends the operating budget. We increase it $280,000 to preserve the Domus Family Advocates at the middle school. All those in favor, please raise their hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 in favor. All those opposed? 1, and abstaining? 1. Oh, Prasad, did you vote? Was Prasad with? Which way are you voting, Prasad? You're voting in favor. Okay, so we will amend that to be 7 in favor.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Since President Hyman, you're on the board, you should be reclusing yourself.
On the board of?
For Domus, right? So you should be reclusing yourself. You shouldn't even have a vote.
Well, that's up to, first of all, that's entirely up to Mr. Hyman to determine whether he has to recuse himself or not.
Right.
It's not up for other board members to determine that.
I know, but isn't that something that we have, it's an
Nope.
ethical piece?
Okay, Mr. George,
Yes, sir.
you're chairing this, but Ms. Hammond, no, I do not need to recuse myself, and I am not. I've abstained.
Yeah, he did abstain, so that helps. All right, so it's 7 in favor, 1 opposed, 1 abstained. So the motion passes. The budget goes up $280,000. I'm sorry for taking a moment to do this. Okay. All right. So, given that we've passed amendment number 7, it makes amendment number 8 moot. Is there anybody that would want to move amendment number 8? As it is kind of moot, given that we've increased the budget for these positions. Yes, Mr. Tonga. Do you want to speak or?
No, I think we want to move to not go to the amendment 9, is what you said? So I have a question.
What I'm saying is that given that we've approved the amendment 7, which adds money to the budget to cover the Domus advocate positions, amendment number 8, which is a budget neutral position, rather motion to cover the positions, it becomes moot because we're adding dollars to the budget to cover these positions. So unless somebody wants to discuss further, which would seem to be somewhat
Redundant, unnecessary. Okay.
unnecessary, right? Exactly.
Okay. No, I just had a question, so I raised my hand to find
Yeah,
out.
understood. Look, these can get confusing when they get nested like this. Okay, so amendment number 8, without objection, we will not take up. Okay, no objection to that. So, are there any other motions from the floor to adjust this resolution 16, which is the operating budget? All right. Seeing none, then, and perhaps Mr. Feely might double check me on this. we now have an operating budget as amended in the amount of 350,000. 526. Sorry.
That's 350 million.
Sorry, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Saying 1,000 all.
350 million, 526,000. I'm learning my numbers. 867.
Agreed.
Okay, agreed with that.
Mhm.
And I would like to get the sped position. Let's see, that's the money and the 1,000,005. All right, so the only adjustment to the positions is an increase of 6 sped teachers and 2 guidance counselors. So it increases 8 positions, which makes the total positions 2,100 and 0.7, right?
Well, actually, the amendment that increased the 5 OSS and reduced 2 APs is a net 3.
No. No, the motion, I'm sorry, let's go back over that. The motion to increase the OSS positions didn't, it was increasing the budget by 280,000 to cover those positions. I'm sorry. So it's the Domus Family Advocate positions.
No. Amendment 6.
Okay.
Amendment 6 was budget neutral in dollars, but it added 3 FTE.
And indeed, I see what you're saying. It increased 5. Yes, you're absolutely right. Thank you. That's why you get the big bucks. All right. So that means a total of 11 positions have actually been added back, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So it's 2,101.7 positions. Is that
2,103.7.
And yes, you're right. Okay. Got it. Holy mackerel. All right. I agree. Okay, thank you. For clarity, I will reread the resolution as amended. Be it resolved that on the board, on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, that the Board of Education approves the 2025-26 operating budget in the amount of $867 and 2,103.7 positions. That is the motion as amended. Any further discussion? Hearing none, then let's take it to a vote. All those in favor? Indicate by raising your hand. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Prasad, are you in favor? Are you in favor, Prasad, or no? You are.
Yeah.
All right. 7. So we have 7 in favor. Opposed? Opposed are 2. And no abstentions. So the amended budget resolution passes 7-0. All right, thank you. We have one more resolution. It's on the grants. Resolution 17, be it resolved that on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the Board of Education approves the 2025-26 grants budget in the amount of 49 million. Why am I doing this? $549,395 and 312.8 positions. Do I have a second? Also move. So thank you, Ms. Munchie South. Any discussion on the grants budget? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the grants budget? All those in favor? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And Prasad, are you in favor? 9. Okay. In favor of resolution 17 on the grants budget, it's 900. So the grants budget passes. Okay. Thank you. And with that, the business of the special board meeting seems to be over, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Hyman to decide on the disposition.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. George. I think that you have somehow become the best fiscal chair that this board has ever seen, or no. So thank you so much for leading us through this.
Superintendent wasn't paying attention.
I know, but Dr. Lucera?
Yes, I'm trying to figure out the increase to the budget, so
Okay,
that's
well,
what I'm focused on.
Well, I thank you for that, but you will need to hear this because we want to heap praise on Mr. Andy George.
Oh,
as
I heard, and I might disagree a little.
Well, we'll have to have a conversation.
I'm still debating it.
Okay, all right. That being the case, though, I do want to tell you that I appreciate the work that board members put in to the research, the background, and diving in to this so that we could have a good conversation tonight. We may not agree on everything, but I appreciate the civility that occurred in this room and the conversations. And what it did was it lent to the tone of people understanding where folks were coming from. And I'm hoping that we can use that to continue the types of conversations that we need to have as we make the difficult decisions that may go forward. This will be sent on to our Board of Finance, and I'm going to be asking all of you to find it in your hearts and your brains to figure out how we might move the city forward, not just the Board of Finance, but the Board of Reps, other citizens and taxpayers in this town, to pass a budget that actually works for the Stamford Public Schools. We heard that the estimation for premium costs would move from 8% to somewhere around 11 to 13. We know that our transportation costs have gone up. We know that special ed costs are rising. And to push all of this into a pressure cooker to stay within 3% or 4% when everything else is rising rapidly, we have to have a good conversation with the rest of the community about this and what makes sense. We cannot cut our ways into an effective school system that meets the needs of all of our children. That is just impossible. We granted a very good contract to the teachers, some of them who are online tonight, and that's certainly more than 3%. So if we're doing that, if we're finding, 7% here, 8% there on things that we need to pay for, to then say that the rest of the system has to suffer along with 3%, we're actually creating a cut. And so we need to consider that as well and be prepared to stand up for a budget that actually works, that we're not spendthrifts, we're not trying to saddle the taxpayers, but we are trying to find the right way to educate our children in this town. So again, thank you all so much for what you've done. The chair will entertain a motion. Oh, Dr. Hammond, your hand is up. Okay.
Yeah. Just let me remind you, last year, we had quite a crew that supported the budget because we were going to cut the music program. I mean, it was just, something else. And then we came back in May and there was a whole new budget. So I don't know if you're going to see the individuals supporting it or not this time, because it was quite a 180 move there. And if we're not sincere about this, and then we come up with a new restructuring plan, I would hope there's going to be support. I cannot support this budget, but I didn't vote to support it, but I know it moves forward now. But let me be very clear. Last year, for those who are new on the board, it got switched, and that was kind of a little surprise for a lot of the individuals who supported it.
Living in the past, I love history, but we've got to be able to move forward. And members of the board have invested in this, as you can see through this process tonight. So that being the case, I feel as though we should be about, as I said before, moving the community towards the right number that fits the needs of the city of Stamford, our students, and supporting all of the efforts that we're making towards great curriculum, great buildings, efforts to feed our children inside the schools and to make sure that things work.
Well, and let me remind you, the teachers are not supporting this budget. We have a new schedule going forward that many parents and teachers are not supportive of. So I'm just putting out the facts that are behind this budget.
That's interesting. We won't debate this, but certainly this budget is supporting their pay increases. So we'll remind folks about that when they decide that they don't want to support the budget that is paying for their pay increases. So, okay. Well, thank you all. Is there a second to the chair's motion to, okay, my God. So seconded by everyone. Mr. Larabino, would you like to join in with a second to adjourn? Okay. All right, we're unanimous. Thank you all so much. I will see you at our workshop this weekend. Thank you.